Manchester, Auburn, Hooksett. This is the Progress Report. If you've been out enjoying this glorious autumn day here, my car thermometer on point registered 80 degrees. This is the first Wednesday of the month, which means I am very pleased to have with me my good friend and great contributor to the public life of the state of New Hampshire and the city of Manchester, and Senator Lou D'Alessandro with me, which is our regular feature on the first Wednesday of the month. I expect Mike Fowler will be back from his well-deserved vacation and join me next week, and we won't have you here, Lou, but we're glad to have you here this week. And what a week it has been, Lou. I mean, my God, we got so much to talk about. And I don't want to in any way slight the guest we have today, Will Stewart, who won a stunning victory in Ward 2 in the municipal elections in the primary and is facing off in a finals coming right up. And he brought his chief campaign benefactor here, Zeke. And we're delighted to have him. Who says New Hampshire's got an aging population? We've got young people here, which we really like.
Bringing the average age down just right here, Bob.
You're bringing it right down. It is a great thing.
For sure.
Lou, I just got done, before we get to Will and his campaign, I just got done speaking to a group at our church here in town about the issue of Medicaid expansion. And I kind of wish you could have been there, because I think you would have been able to provide more than I could. But that's something I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
We, let's just set a little background here. When the Affordable Care Act made it through Congress with no Republican votes, it included the idea that Medicaid expansion would occur in all 50 states.
Yes.
And it got to the U.S. Supreme Court, which by a very narrow margin, with the Chief Justice joining the majority for the very rare time, which was not expected but very welcome, they upheld the Affordable Care Act against various constitutional challenges, but they did not uphold the requirement that all 50 states have Medicaid expansion.
Right.
So it's been a battle, state
battle.
by state by state by state.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, something like 36 states have opted to expand Medicaid, expand it not only to provide medical coverage for low income, but to expand it so you didn't have to have an additional requirement to be part of it other than being low income. You had to meet another criteria. That was all eliminated. And in every state, it's been a battle, and it continues to be a battle.
Sure.
Because right now, as I understand it, Lou, we have a 2-year authorization of Medicaid expansion, which has afforded health care coverage for 58,000 of our New Hampshire fellow citizens and residents. 58,000. But it could all go away because we didn't authorize it except for just the next year.
Well, it certainly could disappear. What we did is we constructed the New Hampshire Health Protection Act, which was an interesting deviation. And what that meant was everybody would move to the insurance cycle. Everybody was part of the exchange, so everybody was insured. So these 58,000 people have insurance. And we had a unique methodology for funding it. And CMS has said the methodology for funding it is not acceptable. And our methodology for funding the difference between what the federal government paid,
which is 95% now, right?
95. It was 100% when we started, so there wasn't any problem. When it began its reduction from 100% to 90% in 10 years, the states were going to have to pick up that 10%.
I thought it was just 5%.
10%. Well, it's 5% now. But when you get to the final 10-year period, it will be 90%. Wow. So New Hampshire came up with a unique system, and the system was this. The difference between the insurance tax of the existing policies and the new policies was taken and made part of the solution. The second part of that was a voluntary contribution by the hospitals. And this voluntary contribution, coupled with the excess tax, made up the difference. Now, in 10 years, that difference could get as high as $70 million. That's a problem. But CMS has said this isn't a good system. It doesn't work.
So we won't be able to use this next time.
No, it's history. It's gone. And we must change the law in this context. Our law says no general fund money can be used. That's part of our statute. In order to make this go, that's going to have to be stricken because we're going to have to come up with a new funding source.
So how are you going to do that?
Well,
Here we are in an anti-tax state.
right?
Let's face it, we are not enthusiastic about taxes of any kind in this state.
Right.
Although
No
we
taxes,
do-
no fees.
Yeah, no fees, although we
yeah.
have a very broad-based tax called the property tax, but leave that aside.
Right.
We are, and the general fund, I mean, my God,
Well, it's going to have to take
how are we going
a
to do
great deal
this?
of
You
well,
see a way to do it?
Well, there's always, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, there's always a way to do it. And the question will be, do we have the courage to do the kinds of things that we need to do in this legislature? You know, I got 400 members, 400 in the House, 24 in the Senate. If we believe that ensuring everybody is in the best interest of the public, we're going to have to find a way. And we don't have a great deal of time to do that because
No,
remember,
it's got to be
our-
done this session.
That's right. Our law expires in 18. So I know that Jeb Bradley has been working over
Yeah,
the
apparently he's
over the
committed
summer.
to saving this.
Well, he's
somehow.
committed to saving it, hopefully. And, we have taken down $1 billion from the federal government, and that's in a separate account. That's a non-budgeted item. It goes into a separate account, which is managed by the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, and that money is then dispersed. And the hospitals got a ton of that money, obviously. It was forthcoming to them. And the premise was that if you reduce the cost of uncompensated care by insuring people, we were going to have better health, it was going to be less expensive, and the base would be broadened so that we had everybody insured. Makes sense, right? When you look
very
at it,
reasonable,
it's
yeah.
a very reasonable solution. The federal government has altered the game, and there have been many attempts to change the Affordable Care Act. Well, it hasn't happened. So at the federal level, we have a problem. Something's got to be done. At the state level, we have a concern. Something must be done. And I heard the governor speak this morning, and I am very fearful of block grant funding.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, block grant funding would destroy New Hampshire. Would destroy New Hampshire. The 50-50 matches that we have, the 90-10 matches that we have, the 75-25 matches that we have, these have been instrumental in us doing what we have done in the area of health and human services. We've been able to do that. And when we got the enhanced reimbursements over a period of time, when the percentage went up, I mean, those were all very significant things for New Hampshire. If this system is changed dramatically, and I think the governor admitted this today at a seminar that I was at, actually. He was at the New England Council breakfast this morning. New Hampshire would be one of the 6 states in the country that suffers dramatically. We would lose dramatically in terms
You
of
think the
dollars.
governor understands that?
He said it today. He knows. He knows. The question is, what's the depth of his understanding? And that's something that we're going to have to find out
Yeah.
because we're coming back in January. All
Indeed
of
we are.
these things are going to be on the table. And think of the city of Manchester. You're going to be an alderman. Think of the city of Manchester.
Yeah.
Think of the money that's flowed to this city to combat the opioid crisis, and the treatment dollars that have come to this city through the Affordable Care Act and the New Hampshire Health Protection Act. What if all of that disappears?
That's
Be in a
going to be
lot
a real
worse shape than
problem.
we are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So-
a key part of it.
Right. These are things that we have to face as we move forward. And it's look, there isn't any problem that can't be solved if people come together and come up with a reasonable solution. That's easy, a lot easier
That's-
said than done.
That's
Often is.
that's
Right.
your mantra all the
Right.
time, Lou, which
Right.
is great.
Well, we got to get it done.
Well, I now want to turn to our guests, Will and Zeke, and welcome you to the Progress Report and congratulate you on what many people found was quite an amazing margin of victory on the municipal elections just recently in September. And you're on to the finals against a guy, I guess, named Bob O'Sullivan. And so I'll give you an easy one. Why do you want to be an alderman?
Well,
Tell us a little bit about yourself and then why you want to be an alderman.
sure. Well, it's all kind of wrapped up together, and I'd say one of the reasons, not to be too trite, but is sitting right next to me.
Oh, this guy?
This guy.
Zeke, huh? Hey, Zeke, why do you think your dad should be an alderman?
Well, I know this saying that he says a lot.
What's that?
he wants people to move to Manchester, not from Manchester.
Really?
He
That
says
sounds like a really good
a
slogan.
lot.
Yeah,
He says that to you a lot? Yeah?
I say it on the campaign trail, don't I? And
that's solid.
Yeah,
That's
Zeke
solid.
comes,
That's solid. That's good.
he comes door to door with me, and he can probably recite.
Nobody
my,
slams the door on you when you got Zeke with you, right?
That's true. You get a cute kid. And,
You got a cute kid in it.
If I only had a puppy too, I'd be.
Yeah, well, that
I
does
think
it.
Zeke could do it all by himself.
But it's what Zeke said, and in my set, I am tired of hearing people say, "Well, we have kids now, time to move to Bedford,"
Right.
or Londonderry or Wyndham or Hollis or
Right.
wherever. And I get it. My wife and I had those conversations too. When
Really?
before he was born, and when he was getting younger, and I mean every parent wants what's best for their kids, right?
Sure, of
And
course.
so I understand the urge, but ultimately, my wife and I we doubled down on Manchester. We like to call it the hometown that we chose. This is where
So you didn't grow up here?
I did not. We moved, Michelle, my wife and I moved up in 2004 so I could take a job at the Hippo. I was a reporter.
Oh, yeah.
I was a newspaper reporter once
Yeah,
upon a
yeah.
time, and I've long since moved on from that job, but have remained here in the city. And this is where Michelle and I chose to make the biggest investment of our lives, our home on
Sure.
Blodgett Street.
Yeah.
It's where we chose to start our family, have our son, who's now a first grader over at Smith Road School. So, we have skin in the game, with regard to how this city turns out. And, particularly in the next 10, 20 years, we have a lot of skin in the game, with him being in the public schools. And we're lucky. He goes to Smith Road School, which is
Sure.
one of the best elementary schools
It's
in
a
the city.
fine school.
It is. But there are challenges,
Sure.
both real and perceived, that I think need to be addressed. But
Right.
on the whole, I'm very bullish on Manchester. I think we're a city of best kept secrets. Yes, we have our challenges, and we need to address those challenges. But overall, it's a great city, and it just needs to needs a little extra push, and needs some vision. Frankly, I think overall that's the biggest problem, and all of the kind of challenges that we see, be they education related,
Right.
crime, public safety, opioids, all of this, all kind of, to me, those are symptoms of a lack of vision. And so, if I'm lucky enough to be elected in November, I'd like to kind of help be solution oriented and really kind of move toward a bigger picture vision. It seems to me right now that a lot of the great things that happen in Manchester are almost happenstance or serendipity.
Yeah.
Kind of comes to mind. You think of the Army initiative, that Dean Kamen's doing down in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
This regenerative medicine, which has the potential, to be a game changer.
Oh,
Yes.
huge.
But that just happened
We got to do a
because
show on that. We got
Right.
to
That's
get him down here.
That's
Go ahead.
amazing.
it is,
Yeah.
and but it's one of those things that the city had no involvement in.
Right.
I remember when the quote in the paper when they called up the mayor, he didn't even know what was happening. So it just tells me that we can be. Right now we're kind of reliant on people like Dean and others, to do
Yeah.
these great things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've been very fortunate in that context. We had Jeremy Hitchcock, who founds a company called Dine. That company now employs 300-400 people, and it's still in the mill yard. It was purchased by another entity a number of months ago, but the inspiration to do that right here in Manchester. And his goal was to have a company, hire Manchester people, stay in Manchester, and he's raising his family in Manchester. He's got a couple of kids, and he and his wife live in the North End, and I was with him yesterday. That's an example. Cayman, of course, is an outstanding example. The guy is, a genius in my opinion.
He's got a reputation around the nation, maybe
Oh yeah,
around the world.
and he's very, very clever, very, very, very insightful. My wife worked at LeBlanc Heating, and Dean's father was a customer. His father was a wonderful artist, and if you go to Dean's office, you'll see the pictures created by his dad. He's a very, very inventive guy. I mean, this concept of the artificial material, funded by DOD. I mean, there's a reason for that. Obviously, we've been overseas for 17 years in Afghanistan. A lot of people are coming back with some very severe needs, and they have to be addressed. But that can go on ad infinitum. There's no tie to an end to that. That kind of insightful investigation and research and development can go on, and the number of people that are going to be tied into that. He's got to raise $215 million to match the 80 to 90 million he's getting, and they're selling little shares for $250,000, and there's no shortage of buyers. This is an amazing project, and Cayman has he's got a great vision, as you put it. He's got a great vision for the city. I don't know if you've heard about the monorail concept that he's bringing forward, but that's another kind of unique thing. I found out about that last week. But those kinds of people want to come to Manchester. There was a nice article in the Boston Globe about Manchester last Sunday.
Yeah, very nice article.
So, Manchester's a good place. We've got to be visionary in Manchester. We've got to think about the future. We're in the 21st century. I've been here for a long time. All of my kids went through the Manchester school system, and two of my kids went to post-secondary education in the public system in New Hampshire. We got to be thinking ahead. We got to have better schools. We got to make our schools better because of the need, and
they have to be perceived to be better.
Yes,
too.
Perception is reality.
Is the key.
It's reality.
Perception becomes reality. Exactly.
Yeah, and local government's vision makes it all happen. We all talk endlessly in the legislature about local control. Mm-hmm. Well, local control. What do you control at the local level? You control the schools, don't you? Mm-hmm. I mean, isn't that the key? And there are a lot of other things that you control, but the schools, I mean, that's the basis that has to be perceived of as excellent. If it is perceived of as excellent, we will, if you get that message out, they will come to Manchester. Young people want to come here. We have a lot of things available to them, and I think we just got to get that. We have to get that message out. I did a study years ago.
It's time for our break, Luke.
Okay, we'll talk about it
we said
when we return.
We will go forward when we come back from our break. Join us, folks. 640-3091. We'd love to have you participate in this program. We're going to get on lots of other topics with Will Stewart and Lou D'Alessandro tonight on the Progress Report. We'll be right back. So here it is, the progress report for the first Wednesday in October 4th to be exact, and I'm very pleased to be joined, as I am on the first Wednesday of the month, with Senator Lou D'Alessandro, a man who has given so much time and energy and accomplished so much for both the city and the state of New Hampshire. And he's a senior citizen, Can't deny that, as
No,
I
I
am.
can't.
But we are very pleased to have here a young, more
young
vigorous. Well, I don't know. He's probably more vigorous.
I don't
that's
know.
Will, that's Will Stewart, who
Right.
is a man of tremendous energy and great ideas, and he's even brought his younger edition here, Zeke.
Even more energetic.
Even
right.
more
Oh,
energetic.
yeah.
He's being damn good here, though. I mean, he's really
Well
sitting there
behaved.
being
Very well
totally
behaved.
charming and quite quiet. That's remarkable. Will, one of the reasons I was so interested that you decided to seek public office as an alderman representing Ward 2 was I consider you have done a tremendous benefit to the city of Manchester to attract people like you with young families here in getting our bike share program going. And, I got to give a great hand, to your co-leader there, Carol.
Carol Gaiman.
Carol Gaiman, one of my favorite people in the city. And the two of you just took this thing on, and somehow you made it happen. Not a dime of city funding in it, which, I kind of wish there was some city money in it, but there isn't. And, tell us a little bit about how that came about, how it's going, and what the future looks like for the bike share program. Is it working out?
It is, yeah. It's really succeeding. There was no baseline data, to kind of compare, so we didn't really know what to expect. But it launched in June and really has become a success now. I think more than when I checked last time I checked, maybe a week and a half ago, approximately 350 registered users. Those are people who have signed up, downloaded the app, given their credit card information, so they're in it.
Right.
Who are out there, renting, these bikes and riding them all over Manchester. It started, we were talking about kind of connections, and
Right.
In this case, it was, Carol, who was kind of a liaison between the YMCA and UNH Manchester, was looking for a way to get, students from UNH up to the Y, where they have, reciprocal rights. They can go up there and work out and use the fitness center. But they found that a lot of them weren't coming up there. And when they inquired why, they found out that, while as the crow flies, it may be a quarter of a mile or something, it's just a little bit too much. Crossing Commercial, crossing Canal,
Right.
traffic, finding parking when you get there, parking when you
Right.
get back, and if
Sure.
you have a lunch break or something between
Right.
classes, it's just not enough time to get there, back, work out. So they thought, well, wouldn't it be great if the students could just ride bikes? Then it's a lot easier. You don't have to worry about parking. You can park right at the door. So Carol approached the group that I run called Bike Manchester, which is the city's bicycle advocacy organization, and said, well, wouldn't this be great? Shouldn't we, how about we do this? And we said, well, yeah, it's absolutely our mission to get more people riding bikes more often in the city. So that's kind of how it started. And Carol and I kind of took the lead and went hand in hand and, got a number of corporate sponsors to, you're right, completely private donations are sponsoring these stations. Currently have
We should
6.
give credit to them. It was the Puritan Restaurant, which has done so much in so many ways.
Correct.
McLean Middleton, where I guess you had some of their very able lawyers that were big bike enthusiasts.
Correct.
What were the others?
The YMCA was
sure.
one. Martinetti Companies was another. And then our largest to date is Southern New Hampshire University.
Oh, yeah.
They sponsored actually 3 of the stations.
Really?
And, I remember talking to, when we went and sat down with Paul LeBlanc,
Right.
their president, and he told us that, right now, don't quote me exactly, but it's something like $2.5 million that
Right,
SNHU
for-
was spending a year
Right.
on, parking shuttles. You see
Right.
these SNHU
Oh, we
buses.
see them everywhere,
Yes.
sure.
Right, because they don't have parking, especially for all their employees down in the mill yard.
Absolutely.
And he sees this as a way to, not a total solution, but
But it's just
it's something that will help alleviate that demand. And it's also, I'll mention this about McLean and kind of one of their reasons. And I think it talks about kind of the the quality of life and things that particularly younger workers are looking for when deciding where to live and work.
Sure.
And I think that things that will probably be on the mind of Dean and Jeremy and others who are looking to attract and retain that talented workforce. Folks can move anywhere. These days, especially with the internet, you can live and work anywhere in the world.
Right.
So Manchester, we're in competition, for talent,
Right.
not just across the country, but across the planet.
Of course.
And remember talking to the folks at McLean, and they said we were talking about placement. Where can we put one of these stations? And they ultimately decided. They said, well, let's put it right on the corner, right on Elm Street, right at
Right.
City Hall Plaza, because we want people to see it. Yes, we want our attorneys to be able to ride it and use it, and they do. But they said, what we really want is for attorneys that we're looking to hire and bring on, we want them to see that, when they walk at the door.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
To see that,
Right.
because they said we're not just selling, are firm. We said, and I've talked to a number of employees or employers say, look, we can offer the same wages as Boston. We can offer a lot of the same perks, benefits, all this stuff. But we're not just selling the firm. We're also selling. We have to sell Manchester. Because we're trying to recruit these kids from all over. And they said that when they come and see a thing like a bike share program, that's an indicator to them that this is a city that cares, kind of has it together, kind of has that cool factor.
Right.
And it's one of those things that people, they may or may not ride bicycles, but when you see a bike share program, you think of all the cities that have bike share programs. Boston, New York, Montreal, Paris. I mean, they all have a certain cachet, and that
nice company to be in.
Right.
Correct, and but it's just one of those indicators that Manchester's kind of an up and coming and progressive place.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what the city needs to be doing more of. While of course,
Yes.
again, focusing on education and crime, those are going to always be the dominant factors. But it's also the little things,
Yes.
like bike share programs, like a river walk, like great parks, like sidewalks that aren't disintegrating.
Right.
Those are the things that matter
Right.
too,
Yeah,
and
sure.
that people will make, can make or break decisions.
Yeah. No
And
question.
you're about to launch a station over on the west side, right?
Correct. Yeah, that will be our 7th station. Hopefully, a little bit later this month. That CMC is our 7th sponsor, and we're kind of figuring out exactly where they want to have the station placed. But again, that will be a good link. We were talking
Yes.
during the break a little bit about the kind of divide,
Right.
literal and figurative, between the east side and the west side. And
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it goes
this
back
will
a
be-
long way, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
it
for
does,
sure.
and this is. I mean, it's a small, maybe more symbolic than anything
Yeah.
else, but it will help facilitate those literal
Sure.
connections.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No question. Anything that enhances that and facilitates that, I think,
Yeah.
it's very important to the.
Now,
to
maybe
the
everybody
city.
knows this, but I didn't. I thought it was a wonderful thing. You get this bike, you get a lock with it. You don't have to just pick another station to stop at. You can stop anywhere in the city you want and lock it up, and then eventually when
Open it up
your
before.
paid time is up or you don't renew it, you can take it back to
Yeah.
a station. But you can stop and enjoy a nice
Yeah.
aperitif in one of our sidewalk cafes or whatever.
Yeah, they
You
have
can
baskets
do
on
this.
front. You can do some shopping.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Well, I think it's a great idea.
It's just a cool thing.
And I've seen the bike racks, and on Elm Street as I walk down Elm Street. But anything that facilitates that kind of movement, I think, is very important. And you mentioned Southern New Hampshire University. I think Paul LeBlanc's done a great job at Southern New Hampshire.
He's got to be one of the great
Oh,
educators in the country. The growth of that place is
Absolutely.
unbelievable.
Absolutely. He followed a model that was put in place by a guy named John Sperling. John Sperling was the founder of the University of Phoenix. I happen to know John Sperling. He's passed away. But at one time, at their high point, the University of Phoenix had 300,000 students. And their mission, I mean, they really were big into the online situation. They got into some trouble for a lot of different reasons, but
Well, they were one of the for-profit colleges.
yes,
right?
they were a for-profit college. But his concept was a very acceptable one in the post-secondary education environment. And I said at one time he had 300,000 students. Now, the Southern New Hampshire University has taken that model, I think, and enhanced it by doing a better job and giving it credibility because of the fact that it stays after its students and it brings its students to graduation and really performs exceptionally well. And Paul's to be given a great deal of credit for that.
And they are nonprofit.
Yes, they're a not-for-profit entity, and I might say I worked there for a long period of time. I was the initial basketball coach there at Southern, at what it was New Hampshire College, and we had a little reminiscent point, and I want to get away from this because this is your show, but my wife used to wash the uniforms after we played. We'd bring them home, and my wife would put them in the washing machine, and we'd do the towels, and we'd do the uniforms, so we'd be ready for the next game. So think of how far we've come. And we used to play in venues around the city. That's when the college really didn't have a lot going for it. But Paul's done great things, and I think the key element is his ability or your ability to bring him into the system. To create a synergistic relationship with the city of Manchester that's good for both, really positive for both.
Yeah.
And the excellence in education makes New Hampshire, again, a center. People want to come here. and they want to stay here. And I think that's important. Think of the number of employees he has.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Lou, because Will, in addition to being a candidate for alderman, has a new job. And it's with Stay, Work, Play.
Correct.
Have I got those in the right order?
You do.
Right.
Stay, Work, Play. I don't know that's why it's in that order. Tell us about that, and you know, you've done a lot already with this bike program, but what else you'd like to see happen to make this happen?
Sure. So,
So
I
people
did.
come here and stay, work, and play.
Right. That's the goal, and I think it's pretty great when I think your professional endeavors and your extracurricular activities, as my wife calls them, can align in this way. And you're right. I did take over a nonprofit called Stay, Work, Play New Hampshire, and it is a statewide nonprofit that aims to attract and retain younger workers, which is to say those
Statewide, not just in Manchester.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
It is a statewide organization.
Right.
But I like to think that my general platform and what I'd like to do, if elected, kind of goes along with that on a more local level.
Yes,
To have
sure.
people stay, work, and play, here in the city. And I think you talk about colleges too. It's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize that Manchester is the largest college town in the state,
Right.
in northern New England for that matter. We
Yeah.
have more college students
Yeah.
in Manchester.
What is it, about 15,000 if you add them all up?
Yeah, I've heard upwards of 20 when
Really?
you consider. I mean, it's like a dozen institutions
Right.
of higher learning.
Right.
I mean, SNHU and UNH Manchester are probably the biggest.
Biggest.
But St. A's obviously, and
Sure.
Mass College of Pharmacy, and Springfield
Institute of
College,
Art.
and Institute of Art,
Institute
Manchester
of
Community
Art,
College.
Manchester
I mean, it's,
Community College.
it,
Right.
and a number of little outposts: Franklin Pierce,
Franklin
Granite
Pierce,
State.
Granite State, sure.
Right.
They're all here.
But nobody thinks of us
Right.
as a college town.
Right.
But just imagine, I mean, we are churning out, so much talent every year, highly educated,
Right.
people,
Yeah.
and and we need to do a better job, frankly, as a state and as a city of
Yes.
retaining that
What's
talent.
the biggest problem with keeping these folks here? Is it job opportunities? What is it?
I think it's a mix of of a lot of different things, and I'll say that. Hopefully, maybe I can come back in a few months. I'll have some hard data for you. Stay, Work, Play is commissioning a professionally done poll, a survey across the state, asking students,
Right.
your young professionals, what are the reasons you consider, what are the factors when you're considering either leaving or staying in New Hampshire. That said, I can tell you some of the things that I hear often. One is student debt. We
Yeah.
have incredible student debt
Yeah.
loads that our
Right.
students are graduating with.
Yeah, that's
There are lack of affordable housing.
Yes.
Is another.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the housing has got to be more affordable here than it is in Boston, Cambridge, and that area. But it's
Right.
still a problem.
It
It's
is,
still a
and it's sometimes it's an inventory problem too. We just
Yeah.
don't have, if you want a McMansion, hey, plenty of those,
Right,
or large,
exactly.
3-bedroom, 2-bedroom houses, lots of
Yeah.
those. A lot less, apartments and kind of starter
Right.
Yeah.
homes, and so it's supply and demand. We have less, so it's
Right.
they're going to be more.
Yeah.
They're going to be more expensive.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
We did put $2.5 million in the capital budget for the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority to create
the
affordable
Workforce Housing
yes.
Trust Fund. Yeah.
Right. So we did put $2.5 million in, and when that bill came to the Senate, there was $500,000 in it. So we increased it by $2 million in order to
thank you for
to
that.
get something going. Well, it's a demonstrated need. We know we have a need, and I represent an area where that need is truly manifests itself, because I have downtown wards 3 and 4. On the west side, I have 10 and 11, and 11 is a very tough area. The housing is problematic. It's highly problematic. A lot of it has been condemned, and it's
Yeah,
got to be improved.
I used to work at NeighborWorks.
So you know.
Senator, yeah, and
Right.
I worked over there,
Right.
in the Squag neighborhood
Right,
and
Squag and
Granite West, Douglas.
Coburn, yeah, that area, and you've done a great job at refurbishing a couple of those homes. Remember when they used to have the
Red
red mark
X's,
on the
yeah.
red X on the door? So we've done some work there, but we need more work, because affordable housing is very important, and it's got to be decent. People have to feel safe. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another key ingredient. And I noticed as I walked in today, had 2 police officers walking down Elm Street. I thought that the walkers is very important. And I think it's important, particularly where we have a lot of that traffic on Elm Street, and that would be basically in the area that you're going to represent, in the northern part of Elm Street would be Ward where Ward 2 and Ward 3 come together.
Mm-hmm.
So safety becomes, in my opinion, a very, very significant issue. People feel safe. The perception is you feel safe, you'll come downtown and spend time downtown, and you'll live downtown. It's a great thing to live downtown.
Oh, yeah.
And
Thinking about it myself.
oh yeah, and the corporate,
Why
you
not?
know,
Yeah.
the corporate housing. My mother-in-law and father-in-law lived in corporate housing when they worked for the Amherst.
No kidding.
Yeah, and they paid $1 a room a month for
Wow.
rent.
Oh,
How
boy.
about that?
That's pretty good.
They lived, and my wife lived in corporate housing when she was a kid. Grew up, grew up there. So, things like that can happen. And most of that housing has been refurbished. It's great now. It's wonderful living downtown. They've condominiumized it and sold those entities off and made decent living quarters out of those places, which had gone really south and when we'd started this urban renewal stuff and knocking everything down.
Yeah, what a shame.
And my great
Yeah,
the
we
great
stopped that.
tragedy.
We stopped it.
We stopped it.
We stopped it, but we should have stopped a little earlier.
We
lost some things we shouldn't have lost.
we lost our beautiful rail station.
Oh, that
I will
grieves
never
me.
forget that.
That was such a magnificent building.
Having taken the train from Boston to
The
Manchester,
Smith
when I
Mansion,
was
we
going
lost
with
that.
my
We
wife.
lost both our canals.
Oh yeah, we lost a
You
lot
know,
of stuff.
we lost a lot of stuff.
But
So, if you become an alderman, and I certainly am hoping you do, because I know you're going to work hard to do that. What are the major things you want to accomplish if you become an alderman for the betterment of the ward and the city?
Well, I think it's first of all, we talked about perception
Yes.
being reality, and I think that I'd like to start attacking things on both fronts. Both the reality of, say, schools. We saw the story in last week's paper about kids not having math books.
yes,
I mean, that
That doesn't
awful.
sound good.
no, and that it's just things like that. That the headline gets out there, and that's what people think of. I think if you ask anybody from outside of Manchester, probably even inside of Manchester, what are the top two takeaways from about Manchester? Generally speaking, I think people will say, bad schools, high crime.
yes,
That's the perception
Yep.
that's out there. I don't think that's necessarily fair.
Right.
Always, and that's one of the reasons Bob, I wrote a book called An Insider's Guide to Manchester to kind of showcase what's great about the city. So I think we need to do a better job of funding. Hey, let's get the kids some math books.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
right.
And let's battle the perception as well.
Yeah.
It's all, I don't want to say it's all going to be smoke and mirrors, but we have to accentuate the positive.
Yes.
We can't it's a double-edged sword, I think, having the state's largest newspaper and the state's largest TV station being right here in Manchester. It's great because they're right here and we can tell our stories,
Right.
but it's also when bad things happen, as they do all over the place, that's going to show up too.
I know it's time for a break. We got a call coming in. Why don't we try that, Lou?
Hit this one.
Yeah, hit that and see what happens. Hello.
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 Hi. You're
Hey, I was hoping the panel could just kind of expand on this no books thing, if you would. I mean, can you go into the whole story? Because there is a whole story there. I don't think it's a simple matter of lack of funding.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
I don't know as I can talk about that. Can you?
It sounds like the caller has some background he can share.
You want to
Yeah,
share something
sure.
with us, Eddie?
Give us a quick.
I was thinking the candidate could share. I mean, they have books. They put the books away because they agreed on Manchester Academic Standards, which is basically a carbon copy of Common Core, which is not a curriculum but a set of standards. Blah blah blah. I mean, come on. Are you saying that there aren't books because there's not funding for books?
It
Are you
sounds.
buying into that whole media lie or what?
What are we talking about? Fake news here? I'm not a member.
Yeah, you seem to have bought it. I mean, there's a whole lot more to that story.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not sitting in school board meetings. I'm not.
And he's not a
privy to those
candidate for
discussions.
school committee either. He's a candidate for alderman, which
Yeah,
his
I know, and they're
major
charged for
task
funding,
will be
but you-
to vote for the
You
budget
asked him,
that the school
Bob,
committee wants.
What's up? And he volunteered. Well, there's the story where there's no books for the math curriculum. As if there just isn't funding for the books, but there's a whole story there.
Well,
Right, but I'll say this. Look, the takeaway is that people will have is that's the headline and that's the story. no books for Manchester schools. Whether there's more to the, I'm sure there is more to the story, but that's the takeaway, and that's the perception that we're fighting against,
Yeah.
and that's what people, not just here in Manchester, but
Yeah, but you were perpetuating it, though. You put it out there basically as like fact. You
Well-
basically went with it. You
No,
perpetuated it.
no,
I
no.
thought you were going to say,
Eddie,
let's talk about what happened.
Eddie, give us a break. He was talking about the perception of Manchester schools is bad. He wasn't saying
All
the
right,
schools
great.
are bad.
No, all right, then we'll
And
clarify.
this
That's
you
why I
got to
said,
admit
go
this
ahead.
this was not a
Go
good
ahead and
headline for
clarify.
Manchester
Tell us-
schools.
Tell us why they don't have books. Well, we're willing to listen. I mean, go ahead.
Well, do you have an answer for that yourself?
I already said it. I want to hear his answer.
I said
I
I'm
want to hear his clarification.
I'm
You said
speaking
give
to-
me a break. I'm like, all right, great. Go ahead, clarify. You got the mic. You're on.
I'm speaking to the perception and the headlines that things like that come out, are damaging, to attracting and retaining, families here in Manchester. When you see headlines like that, that just feeds into I guess we have to go to Bedford where they have their act together.
That's the
All right.
problem.
Have a good night.
Thanks for the call, Eddie. See you soon. Okay, I think we're ready for our final break here. We'll take a very quick break, and we'll be back with Will Stewart and Zeke, who hasn't had much to say, but we'll have to get him into participating in our last segment. And we'll be right back, folks. 640-3091 if you want to call and participate, as Eddie just did, and we welcome you to do that. We'll be right back. So this is the progress report for the first Wednesday in October, October 4th. Very happy to be joined, as I am on the first Wednesday, by Lou D'Alessandro, our state senator, our dean of the Senate, and Will Stewart, who is a young but very fine contributor to the public life of this city, as the things we've been talking about, and he's a candidate for alderman in Ward 2, where he won you had what was the primary? It was 4 candidates?
5 of us.
5 of you. And so it was you, and the other top vote getter was a guy named Bob O'Sullivan. So that'll be what's on the ballot in November. Mm-hmm. And I think you contribute some of your success, Will. I mean, you ran a vigorous and did a lot of door knocking and do the things candidates should do. But
And I appeared on the progress report prior to
there's the key. There's
That's
the
what
key.
did it. That's what did
That's
it.
what
Push
does
me
it
over
every
the
time. But you brought along a key campaign ad in Zeke here. Zeke, your dad tells me you've got a suggestion for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. What's your idea of how we should change the city around?
Well, I was thinking that there should be like a little place that we should vote for older kids, like in between the black building that has 20 floors over there,
Mm-hmm.
and like in between the other building on the other side. There should be like a little spot right there that the older kids hang out.
Oh,
And what would the older kids do?
Like some playgrounds that they really think like where there's something that is missing and has been missing for years.
So better playground equipment?
Like one time there's like some bars and like
At Livingston Park?
there's supposed to be a slide there, and like I have never seen a slide on that empty bar, so I want to replace it.
all right.
Okay.
Sounds like a solid platform to me.
That's a solid
There's a
platform.
pretty
there.
neat idea. We
Yeah.
have aldermen. What about alder kids?
Right, right.
I like
we gotta
that.
get those
I
older
like
kids.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's good vision.
We've been talking
That's-
for a
that's the
long
key.
time about including some
Right.
students in the Board of School Committee, and I don't
Yeah.
understand why that hasn't happened there.
Well, and,
certainly.
and that's something that's happened around the state.
It's happened
many
around the
many
state. Why
communities do
not?
have a student who's a member of the school board. I think that's a great idea, and you could drill down and get what's going on in the schools. Are there textbooks or are there not textbooks? And get it from the kid who's using the textbook or not using the textbook because it doesn't exist. Textbooks have been a problem in Manchester for a long period of time. I think a few years ago, didn't the school board borrow $2 million from the city budget to buy books? I believe that happened. I can't quote the exact time, but I know there was a situation where they had to borrow money for books. And books are important, but the ability to do things online now has become a significant part of the learning process. You can get those things up to date. Textbooks go out of date. Having been a teacher for a long period of time and know how expensive books are, I was teaching at St. A's, and the text for my course was $100. And it's state and local government is the but the ability to get stuff from the library and because of the internet and the ability to access sources, those can be used and they're very, very effective for kids. Very effective for kids. And in the old days, and I'm saying the old days, my students used to get the Sunday Times. And we would do section 4 of the Times, the News of the Week in Review, and we'd go over that in my class. Now the Times is still a very, very good newspaper. And I think there are 2 newspapers in the country that have increased circulation, believe it or not: the Times and the Washington Post.
Is that so?
And that's because
really interesting.
it's because of what's going on in the country.
Yeah.
And but sources are very important. But a text is a very significant part of the learning process. You've got to have a text, and it's got to be up to date. And I think in math, boy, we're progressing and moving so quickly in math, in ways to teach math and how math is absorbed by students at this point in time. I think one of the problems we had is we've cut down on the math curriculums. We used to teach Algebra 1, Algebra 2, plane geometry, solid geometry, and for the more advanced kids, trig and so forth. And then my daughter at West High School went through the entire math curriculum. And she was very good in math. Her mother's very good in math. Her father isn't very good in math, but she was very good in math. Had all of those were offered at the time. We've watered down the number of courses that are offered.
That's really
in
a
our
shame.
school system. I think that's highly problematic too.
Hey Zeke, are you good at math? Do you like math? Well, go for it. I tell you, I'm with Senator D'Alessandro. I was not good at math, and boy, am I feeling it now. I really am. I'm great with yakking away, but it has me a math problem, and I'm in trouble. I'll have to help your help, Zeke, on this stuff. What's the rest? You got just over a month to go to the final election. What's that going to be like for you? A lot of appearances, a lot of knocking on doors, or?
It'll be talking to as many Ward 2 voters as possible,
Okay.
knocking on as many doors as possible, and having those conversations and hearing what the issues are, and what, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, needs to be my focus.
That's great, and certainly wishing you well. Maybe we should go on to some other things here, Lou. as we were gearing up here, you wanted to talk about something pertaining to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah,
I think it was an interesting story. I'd like to have people hear.
Well, I think the military academies are a great foundation for the building of the professionals in our military. The Air Force Academy had this very tragic situation where racial slurs were posted, and the superintendent of the academy stood up and said quite categorically, without any nonsense at all, listen, if you're going to do something like that at this institution, you don't belong here. Get out. And remember, you're going free. Everything you get there is free. It's on the taxpayer. And if you're going to be a racist and you're going to do this, perform this kind of aberrant behavior, you don't belong here. So get out. And he had the courage of his convictions to do that. And he brought the whole corps together, 4,000 students, and he gave it to them, hook, line, and sinker, and he asked them all to pull out their phones, and get the message. I thought, you talk about the right time, and the right place for leadership. That was a manifestation of leadership. And, I was in the service when segregation was part and parcel of the American system. And I know what it was like when a minority person could not hang out with a white person. And when Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America, was a segregated city, blacks could not go into establishments.
And interesting enough, the place that we first broke that barrier was in the military.
Yes.
That was the first part of American society in a major way that did break that barrier down.
Well, that barrier has really never been broken down. That barrier,
not entirely.
That barrier still exists.
No, not entirely.
And I think it's about time we face that issue. Yeah. Let's face up to it. We're all Americans. We're all equal, and let's face up to the issue where bias to still manifest themselves. And the South, it is still strong. I mean, look at what happened in Virginia. Just look at what happened there. I think that was atrocious. I spent some time at the University of Virginia taking some courses, and it's a beautiful place. Charlottesville is a beautiful place.
It certainly is.
It's a magnificent school. They got beautiful buildings, beautiful surroundings. And what happened there was the manifestation of racism and hate like I've never seen it. I have, and I'm telling you, I've been at some places where there was a lot of hate. And growing up as an Italian kid in a non-Italian neighborhood, we got a lot of flack from our neighbors. I'm telling you that. We got a lot of flack from our neighbors. But what happened in Charlottesville was deplorable, absolutely deplorable. And we can't tolerate that. And I think the superintendent of the academy stood up and made it known that kind of activity is not going to be accepted. And I applaud him. I really do. I think that's the courage of your convictions, and you ought to speak out when you see it wrong. And too many people won't do that. And we've got to do that to make our society better and make our city better and our state better.
Yeah. I'd just like to give a shout-out to our minority leader, Steve Shurtleff, who I know you respect and admire as I do. He just announced that he is going to be down in Birmingham, Alabama on Election Day when this guy, Roy Moore, who is, he is the Republican nominee to succeed Jeff Sessions to be the U.S. Senator from Alabama, one of the U.S. Senators from Alabama. And Roy Moore, for those of you who don't know, insisted upon having a big piece of sculpture with the Ten Commandments in front of his courtroom when he was the Supreme Court Chief Justice of Alabama. And he was ordered twice by the federal courts to remove it and did not do so and was cited for contempt. And this is the person they've nominated. But there is a Democratic candidate down there, and I'm just very proud that Steve Shurtleff said he's talked with him and he's going down to be part of the effort to help this guy who's not Roy Moore become the next U.S. Senator from Alabama. It's very heartening to me, Lou, to see the beginning of the end of these honoring of these Confederate generals who, they were great generals, no doubt about it. Robert E. Lee was a fine general, kind of screwed up at Gettysburg, but that's okay. But they were fighting to tear apart the United States and to maintain slavery as the key part of the economy of the southern states. That's what they were fighting for, and we don't want that. And so I guess that's about where we got to leave it because time has run out again. Will, thanks for coming. Thanks for bringing Zeke.
Yeah.
I like his older kid proposal, and
You heard it here first on the progress report.
heard it first on the progress. And this is the key to success.
What do they say? Breaking news.
That's right.
Breaking news. It's all breaking news these days.
Great.
And next week, I expect my good friend Mike Farley to be back, and we'll be back with our edition of the Progress Report at that time. And I'll be looking forward to that. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of this beautiful, beautiful